Brilliant. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Staffordshire Chamber of Commerce. My name is Laura Hodgkiss, and I'm the Event and Training Team Leader here at Staffordshire Chamber of Commerce. And I'm delighted today to announce Sarah Spink, who's going to be doing our webinar this morning, which is Midlands Connect, Refreshing Transport Investment for the Region. Sarah, it's over to you.
Thanks very much, Laura. Good morning, everybody. Midlands Connect is the subnational transport body for the region. So before I get too far, I think rather than me explain it, I'm just going to show you a short video just to show what we've achieved over the last couple of years. She says, hopefully, assuming the technology works for me.
The Midlands is at the heart of the UK. We connect its nations, cities and regions with millions of people and goods travelling through, to and from the Midlands every day. Our future success relies on having a modern, green and efficient transport network. Since 2016, Midlands Connect has worked alongside the government to research, develop and recommend transport projects that will drive social, environmental and economic benefits for our region. And together, we're making progress. Over the past year, we have launched plans for a region-wide tap and cap smart ticketing initiative to allow passengers to travel seamlessly across the whole of the Midlands via train, tram and bus under a daily payment cap. Developed Midlands Engine Rail, our rail improvement plan to enhance connectivity across the Midlands and beyond. Worked with government to make the most of HS2 and bring benefits to communities sooner. Helped the Department for Transport shortlist and recommend schemes that will improve our most important roads, some of which have already received funding from government. But there's much more left for us to do. We're creating an updated strategy focusing on overcoming the impact of COVID-19, reducing emissions, and accelerating our journey to becoming carbon neutral. We're developing plans to help the freight and logistics sector to move to alternative fuels and helping local authorities to accelerate the delivery of charging points for electric vehicles. We're developing growth and improvement plans across important trade and logistics corridors, routes that allow the delivery of essential supplies, support new jobs and housing, and link businesses to important domestic and international markets. We're moving forward with our rail strategy to develop our schemes and make them shovel-ready. And we'll focus again on technology, bringing more operators and areas onto smart ticketing schemes to boost passenger numbers and looking at ways to improve mobility in rural areas. Despite all of the challenges ahead, the future is bright. In 2021, we will continue to work with government to build a productive, prosperous and mobile Midlands.
So as you can see, we've been quite busy. As it said there, Midlands Connect has been around since about 2016. In fact, I actually joined in January 2016, and we released our first strategy in March 2017. Apologies for that. I had another video decided to try and play in the background there. Let's hope that one stops now. As I said, when we released the first strategy in March 2017, it was very much about what we could do, how we boosted the region's economy by sort of investing in infrastructure. Because that was the objective at the time. And it was the first time we brought the East Midlands together with the West Midlands. We cover an area that goes from the Herefordshire-Welsh border all the way across to the Lincolnshire coast. So we've got rural, we have urban, we have everything thrown in there. But so we produced this first strategy, and it was almost a blueprint about what we should be doing over the next few years, how we work together as a region, how we encourage and make the most of sort of the development of HS2 across the region. So we did that, and then we worked our way, if you like, through this blueprint, and it came to sort of about 18 months ago now, and it was sort of, well, times have changed. And if you remember, this is actually pre-COVID. Times have changed. What are we going to do? We've got a lot more emphasis on decarbonisation, climate emergency, reducing transport emissions, but also this whole sort of levelling up agenda. We hear so much at the moment about sort of north-south, you know, but we've got to think about levelling up within that as well, because obviously, where does the Midlands sit in a north-south agenda? So what I'm going to do is take you through a few slides that really take you on the journey that we've been with the strategy refresh, and show you where we are now with our engagement process. Now, the engagement started on February the 4th, and it's going on until March the 19th. So I hope after watching this, you'll go along to the website, have a look at some of the documentations and answer some of those questions, because your input will help how we define the sort of strategy going forward and where we focus our resources. So let's hope I can start this slide without starting another video. There we go. So as I said, really, it's sort of telling you what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're engaging, and then what I want to know is what your priorities are. This bit of a convoluted diagram here, but it sort of explains how we started this process. We initially did this sort of, why are we doing this? What should be in a new strategy? Although I should say this is a refresh, not a rewrite. It's not a completely new strategy, because we've done a lot of good work since the initial strategy came out, and we want to harness that and take that forward. We don't want to sort of start again from a blank page. So we sort of scoped what should be in it, what should our objectives be. We then did some work with focus groups back in September last year, which sort of said, okay, have we got the right objectives? Are we moving in the right direction? Now the technical team is looking very much at things like how we appraise schemes and what schemes have the biggest impact, and are we appraising them in the right way? We will then, over the summer, refine this down and come out with a strategy in the autumn. So why are we sort of engaging now? What sort of things are we asking? We'll get onto that in a little while, but it's really about making sure that the wider partnership understands a sort of prioritization process, understands that you can't have everything. So what areas should we be looking to invest in? The various little bits along the top really relate to our governance, our steering groups, our boards, because this is a partnership across the region. So we've got to make sure we take the region with us on this journey. So when we started talking in September with the focus groups, these are some of the areas that really came in. It's this sort of connected Midlands. It's not necessarily about getting somewhere quicker, it's about getting somewhere more effectively. It's about, instead of having one train a day, maybe, you know, an hourly service, it's about, instead of diesel services, can we have electric services? Instead of one carriage, can we have 5 carriages? You know, it's completely apathetic's the wrong word. It doesn't matter which mode we're particularly looking at. It is all about that sort of connectivity. And this isn't just infrastructure. This is digital connectivity as well. We shouldn't forget that. And we should also not forget that transport is an enabler. You know, why do we want to move? Why do we want to go places? You know, it's not just let's put a road here, or let's put a new railway here, or let's upgrade this. It's about understanding why people move and where they want to go. Now, this differs obviously massively across the region. So, you know, there's problem number one. How do you create a region-wide strategy for individual areas? Well, the key to that is you actually work very, very closely with the local authorities. You'll notice there's a bullet on there about complementing local planning and policy. And that planning really does come into it, because we start bringing up things like land use. You know, what we want to do is make the economy of the region work. You know, yes, for people who live here, but we've got to invest that sort of additional business and, you know, make housing growth more sustainable. So how do we work with the local authorities to make sure that we're all working together on that? And this is really good fun in some ways, because actually we've been doing this across the region, and what we're doing is actually saying to Westminster, you know what, Westminster, We can work across a corridor or across a region. We can work with different organisations. So you have to as well. You know, we have to get the Department for Transport working with BEIS, working with MCHLG, all these different areas really working together. And then I probably shouldn't forget the Midlands Engine, because of course they have this sort of overriding economic vision for the region, and it's how we feed into that and how we make that happen, because transport and connectivity is essential to make that happen. So I've spoken about the sort of challenges we're facing with this strategy, and obviously COVID has sort of come along while we've been looking at it, but we're talking about that sort of driving recovery. You hear the Prime Minister talk about build, 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 but actually to do that we need to plan. And one of the problems we have with infrastructure investment across the region is, firstly, it's very stop-start. You'll have a bit of funding for this and then it will stop, and then someone will say, right, what have we got for the next, what schemes are ready to go next? What can we do moving forward from this? So we need to make sure we have a more continuous program, or a pipeline, or a conveyor belt, whatever metaphor you choose to use. But also, given the sort of COVID issues, we need to make sure we can do this faster. We need to accelerate this development. I'm pretty sure we can all name infrastructure that has been around for the last 20 or 30 years and still hasn't been built, still hasn't been developed. We need to work out a way of accelerating that program. I mean, the government have put in a new department within the Department for Transport, which is this sort of whole Project Speed, which is how you accelerate that development, how to get sort of something through the system in 3 years rather than 10. That would be awesome. That would be so good to be able to do that. And by doing that, we can maybe target some of these investments in some of those areas that have been more adversely affected by the pandemic. That would obviously help the economy. That would grow the region. We also need to make sure that this economic growth goes where it's needed. We need to make sure in this sort of post-Brexit world that our businesses can access ports, airports, free ports, whatever the case may be. It's actually sort of budget day today, so we're sort of keenly watching to see what announcements are made, especially around the sort of free port development. I mentioned levelling up earlier, but the first thing I say to anyone is, define levelling up, because of course we have the north-south, we're the Midlands, we have east-west, we have urban-rural, we have coastal, we have inland. And then recently I had a gentleman from another chamber asked me what I thought about sectorial levelling up, because some sectors feel they need more help than others. What we've got to make sure is that we level up both locally, regionally and nationally, and I think that's an incredibly hard thing to do. And again, that's why working with the local authorities and tapping into what they're doing as well is key, because nobody gets up in the morning and says, you know what, I'm going to make a local journey today, or I'm going to make a strategic journey today. Chances are you're making both. If I get the local train from my house to Birmingham, I could then pick up an intercity train, or to go to London, I could then pick up a tube or a bus. It's a series of journeys, but to me, making that journey as a passenger, I'm making one journey. So we need to make sure that our thinking and our planning works in that way as well. We're not having those sort of separate areas. And if you remember from the video, that's where things like the smart ticketing come online. I've mentioned HS2, and you sort of saw it in the video. Obviously, we want HS2 to work for the whole region. It's not just about those areas that have got stations. It's making sure we connect the people into those stations, making sure those stations are places where people want to get to. And of course, seeing HS2 delivered in its entirety, because we need HS2 not just for the connectivity it brings, but also for that released capacity that we get, because what we get back, we can then improve the local and the regional network as well. And then, of course, last but by no means least, the sort of decarbonisation of transport emissions. So we want to make sure that anything we put forward, anything we say this is needed, doesn't adversely affect the region's response to the climate emergency. We've got to make sure that we work with areas. We know we need to have a road network. It's we can't just go in there and say, oh, we're not doing this or we're not doing that. We know we need to have that network suitable for our freight, for our hauliers, for goods to move around the region and to export. However, we need to make sure we're doing the right things in the right places. We've recently looked at some work which we call sort of a carbon baselining study that sort of says this is the problem in different areas. And by doing that, it helps develop a solution, or helps with a solution. It's not a solution, but what we can say is things like, we know that in this particular area, the strategic road network is causing the problem, or we know in this area, the main problem is coming from freight vehicles, or we know in this area, the problems coming from short journeys. So once you understand the problem, obviously it's far easier to come up with suitable solutions. So when I said we did some engagement in September, it really was about these objectives. I'm not going to sort of go through and read all these out. You can see these on the screen, but I think we've touched on a lot of these within the discussion so far. It is really about what Midlands Connect is here to do, how we help our local authorities, how we become that bridge between local policy and national policy. It's making those sort of big national statements and those national policies. How do we apply them and make them work in our region? And also, how do we show the government that actually this thing that may look like a local or a regional piece of infrastructure or project is actually key to the national interest? And that's sort of where we're going from this. It's really sort of focusing. I mean, I put this up as one slide, but this was quite a serious piece of work to get to this. You know, we had a lot of engagement, we had focus groups, and then of course it had to go through our own board and governance as well. So I mentioned appraisal earlier. It's very easy sometimes to, from a transport planner perspective, to say, right, we have a business case, we have what we call a benefit cost ratio. This is the benefits we're going to get, this is how it costs. But how do you monetize some of those benefits that really haven't got a cost, haven't got a figure associated with them? And this is why, and I think the government are actually looking at this as well, the way we appraise things has got to be adapted to the situation and to the sort of position we now find ourselves in across the country. So I mean, we have to say, okay, are the environmental indicators the sort of top level? We have in terms of economics, how infrastructure cases are looked at, we have a limit. If the benefit cost ratio is lower than a certain amount, it's a no-no. It's not good value for money. Do we do that same? Do we have an environmental statement that says, you know what, if it's not doing this, then no, we're not going to look at it. We need to work out to do that. We need to work out what the priorities should be. So you can see there some of the areas. I mean, the one on the left in the green is very much your sort of traditional, your journey times, your reliability. But there we've got other ones coming in there. Public transport connectivity. How do you measure connectivity? We then have obviously rail capacity. That brings in sort of overcrowding. We have those social indicators. You know, can people access the services and the areas they need to and they want to? What is the impact? You know, severance, that's a big word. I mean, cutting people off. If we put it, if somebody develops, you know, a large road scheme, you're essentially cutting off potentially two communities. You can have the same with a railway line as well. Journey times, commuting. Do we think post pandemic that will change? Are people prepared to commute further but go in less often? We do think travel patterns are going to change, and we're sort of working with our partners and working with the local authorities to work out how that's going to be. Through the economic productivity, so that's journey times and journey time reliability. Journey times, you know, if you make two places closer together in a journey time, you will, economic theory tells you that they will do more business. So that's what we're trying to do in places like sort of Coventry and Leicester, two cities but completely sort of separate in some ways, but really they're very close and there's a lot going on between them. Access to employment, access to sort of housing, and are we increasing an area's attractiveness? You know, do we to housing, to investment, to employment? And then it goes on to that sort of rebalancing area. And again, do we want to sort of focus our investment on areas that haven't had as much investment, are struggling, or do you, on the other end of the spectrum, do you sort of put money in areas you know you're going to get that investment, it's going to work. So it's how much sort of a risk do you want to take, and does that leveling up become the priority? So it's really working out what in all these little boxes the priorities should be. I mentioned the sort of carbon. There's also obviously sort of noise, biodiversity, all those sort of things come into it as well. So with objectives like that, you wonder, how on earth do you get any sort of scheme appraisal? But that's what both us and the government and lots of different people are looking at the moment. Should objectives, should the objectives be different in different areas is another question. Can we measure a rural scheme in the same way we measure an urban scheme? Can we measure a rail scheme in the same way we measure a road scheme? All these questions are sort of being looked at the moment. So what sort of things will help us develop these objectives? What sort of things do Midlands Connect look at? So this just gives you an idea of some of the projects that we're looking at across the region. We have the ones on the right are these sort of areas that, we talk freight, we talk sustainability, we talk, all these areas go across every project we look at. But then on the left, you've got the sort of rows that sort of give you a breakdown of some of the areas that this needs to work in, this needs to be worked in. And again, right at the bottom, those local measures are key. There's a lot of discussion at the moment about the investment going into active travel, to walking, to cycling, which is great, not necessarily for those interregional trips. Do we need to make those interregional trips? Could they be done digitally? But it's making sure, and we're going back to this integration again, how do I pay once and use the train, the tram, the bus, the electric scooter, all these things, how do we work with the local authorities to make them seamless? And I think that's really key. And these are some of the sort of interventions, for want of a better word, that you will see when the strategy comes out later in the year. So we are doing some engagement at the moment, and why are we asking the questions? Well, we want to know what people's priorities should be. We want the people to think about, if you were in charge, if you had the purse strings, where would you be spending your money? Now, we've been doing, we've done some consumer research. You may have seen some of that in the press recently. We've been doing some webinars. These are actually all finished now. We did one on leveling up, one on how to build back better, and one on the sort of environmental challenges and decarbonisation of transport. Those are all available on the website, which you can see down there. Great to watch. Really, they're only about 45 minutes long, so really interesting, and some great speakers and questions. So we've got that going on. We have documents. We've got 2 documents on the website. One is a shorter one is a longer one. But again, they sort of tell the story to this point, how we got to this point where we're asking these questions. And then there's also this interactive tool, which we're trying to come up with a better name with it. But if you think of it, it's a bit like sort of a fantasy transport planner game. If you think about how people play the fantasy football, where do you spend all your money on the strikers, or do you save some money for the defence? This is the same sort of thing. But if you were in charge, you have a set amount, and you can sort of spend your credits on various policy options. So you say, right, okay, well, I'm going to put all my policies into railways. That's fine. And then you press the go button, and it will tell you in sort of 10 years time, if you've put your money in that, what the impact will be, what the impact on jobs will be, what the impact on housing will be, what the impact on carbon will be. And so it's sort of probably being a little bit flippant here. So great, you can now get from Stafford to Wolverhampton, in 2 minutes on the train, but your Amazon delivery is going to take 2 weeks because we haven't put any money into road improvements. Because we haven't put any money into alternative fuels, actually carbon's got worse. So it's understanding the trade-offs. So that is on there. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. We have these documents as well. One is a summary document. I think that one's about 10 pages long, and then one is about 25 pages. And really, as I say, it says what we've done to this point. It's not a draft of how the strategy is going to look. It's sort of saying, it's going through some of the things that I've sort of mentioned to you already. But the questions at the end are pretty simple, really. In your area and across the region, depending on your top priority, what projects and programs would you prioritize? So it's sort of saying, if sort of this building back better and post-COVID-19, if that's your top priority, where would you focus investment? Would it be on road schemes? Would it be on railways? Would it be on electric scooters? All these sort of questions, you know, you're free rein to sort of say what you would like to do. The same is this sort of levelling up agenda. If you want to level up the Midlands, where should the investment be? And then the other two, the sort of environmental sides. What would be your priority for a more sustainable transport network? And when we're talking about this low carbon economy, where should the government be investing money there? So that's what those are the key questions we're asking. Available on the website with the documents and the questions. So please take a look at those and get your answers in by March the 19th. In addition, as I say, there's access to the tool or the Fantasy Transport Planner game is from the website, but there's the sort of website for it there as well. But it's you making your choices. Once you've had this game and you've had your play and you've seen what you can do, you press submit, and then we will get a list of everyone who's had a go on the game. Obviously, all completely anonymized and all that sort of thing, but it will just say, I think it asks for the first part of your postcode, so we'll know. So, you know, somebody from this area says these are the choices they would make. And if you don't like your first choices, you can go back and change it and have another go. You don't have to submit until you're completely happy with the sort of choices you've made. And I think that's key. It's really about making people understand that there are trade-offs. You can't sort of go in and say, right, I want to do everything. So that's something else for you sort of budding transport planners to go and have a play with and have a go at. The webinars I've talked about, they have actually, I say, all gone now, but they are on the website. Please go and have a look at those, because we had some really, really great speakers. So what do we do next? Well, no one's sort of sitting on hold while we do this engagement. The tech team, as I said, we're talking very much through that appraisal, how we look at schemes, what the priorities should be. This will then go on over the summer with the inputs from this engagement. We will hopefully produce a draft strategy that will go through our governance over the summer and then finalised in the autumn. However, we do have the sort of a couple of spanners that the government may throw into the mix, which may delay things slightly. We're still waiting for the integrated rail plan. That will basically, that's a document that essentially will say, how is HS2 going to fit into the region? We put a lot of work and a lot of effort and a lot of time into providing evidence for this. How do you make HS2 work for both Midlands and the North? You've also got the government transport decarbonisation plan in there as well. So I think that is pretty much it from me. But what I would please encourage you to do is go onto that website, have a look at those engagement documents, and really sort of get back and tell us what you think. Go through the chamber if you want to contact me directly, and I'm happy to talk to sort of other groups should you have any in mind. But for now, thanks for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day. Back to you, Laura.
Fantastic, Sarah. Thank you so much for that presentation, Sarah. And it sounds like we're doing some great news across the region, so hopefully it will be a success, and we're doing really well with that. Thank you, Sarah, so much for speaking today. For everybody that's watching, and we do obviously host a lot of other webinars on our webinar library that you can watch on demand, as I call it now, as whenever you like, really. So we look forward to seeing you at one of our other webinars, and thank you very much. Bye everyone.